Do you want to live in ease, joy, and pleasure like we talked about last week? But the passage in the Bible that says deny yourself and take up your cross daily and follow me, and others similar to that verse seem to clash with that. I had several questions from last week's Heart Spark about this very thing, and I struggled with the same questions for most of my life. And until the last few years that I began to truly break free from the religious programming of my upbringing, and realized that I didn't understand the fullness of that verse and the true meaning of that verse. And I wanted to experience the freedom that Jesus is really calling us into, because he doesn't call us into bondage. He invites us into freedom. He does say, though, in a life of union with him, that there will be suffering, and that we do have to learn how to mature as Christians and deny our flesh. But denying our flesh and denying his ease and his joy and his pleasure that flows through us when we're living in our authentic self are two very different things. We settle for a life driven by and directed by our flesh, by our gratifications, and relief from our existence becomes our life. When we live a limited life with a shut down heart and a spirit disconnected from his spirit, and when our heart isn't open and whole and fully alive, we will settle for a harder and a smaller existence, one of struggle, striving, and surviving, than the one that we were created for. And then we will battle with our fleshly gratifications. They will run us, and they will lead us astray, because our flesh rebels when our heart doesn't get to live fully alive. And when we're not in spirit to spirit connected with him, then we can't live spirit directed, and we can't live heart centered the way that we were created to, centered in our true essence, fueled by deep passion and the desires that he wired in us. He put those desires there, grounded in our unique purpose and calling, led by the joyful, easeful flow of his Holy Spirit in us. And that's a whole different life than being driven by our flesh that seeks to find life in dead things, and where our deep hunger isn't satisfied ever, and our thirst is never quenched. Or maybe we're trying to fight our flesh constantly through self-discipline and self-effort and our own self-strength. But he wants us to live spirit to spirit, connected with us so intimately that we're transformed into his likeness in the fullness of joy. And so we don't have to struggle so much or try to do everything ourselves or carry our own burdens or even try to fulfill our calling on our own, because that will feel hard and burdensome too. We're buying into a lie if we're living any other way than a God-powered, easeful, joy-filled life. He came so we're free from performance and having to try to be good enough and try hard enough. And so we don't have to stay in those rules, entrapped by rules and rigidity. But we can live with our hearts fully open, fully alive, in the pleasure and the ease of the life he created us for. Wouldn't you learn to live, or learn how to live and to shift in that way of living every day in the God-powered life of ease and joy you were made for? Instead of the constant struggle, the stress, the striving, the surviving, the self-effort, the self-gratification, the self-sufficiency, self-denial that we suffer in. And yeah, there's going to be some suffering. Because when we embrace our true self and we live in spirit communion, fully alive, because we live in a broken world where darkness has dominion, there will be some suffering for what we love. But what Jesus invites us into is to live in the same passion that he did for his unique purpose of saving the world. He invites us to discover and understand and embrace the passion that we have in us for that unique purpose and calling that we are called to in the world, as our part to bring the world back into wholeness and harmony as God originally intended. Though there were times of suffering for Jesus for his calling and in his purpose, Jesus wasn't miserable in his calling, and he wasn't miserable in his life. And he didn't stay self-disciplined by self-effort and his own trying all the time. And God hasn't created us to be miserable in our calling or in our lives. He doesn't expect us to be good and holy by our own self-effort either. He's inviting us to open our hearts, to connect fully with his spirit, to understand and embrace our calling and be fueled by our unique passion and His power in us to step into a life of purpose and holiness and joy with Jesus. So if you opened your heart and you embraced your authentic you, and you connected with the true passion, the thing that lights you up and brings you the most joy, what would you be so passionate about that you're willing to suffer for? And that wouldn't feel like suffering, because the deep fulfillment that you feel and the kingdom reward that you experience is so great that it is beyond worth it. God isn't asking you to shut down your heart and deny your passion or your pleasure. He's inviting you to fully engage in heaven's perspective by realizing who you really are, not the limited version of yourself, settling for struggling with your flesh, all on your own, trying to do it with you in the driver's seat, trying to get it all right in life, trying harder with this fleshly limited perspective and self-effort and self-help. In the Spirit, we have access to His supernatural power and receive His love and His goodness and His joy and abundance that otherwise we don't have when we are in the flesh trying to do it ourselves. It's a new way of living. It's actually dying to old striving, struggling, and limitation and coming alive in Him as the real you, passion-fueled, purpose-centered, kingdom-minded, Spirit-led, Jesus-powered, guided by the wisdom of the Creator of all creation. It's a totally new way of living rather than struggling in the self-effort and constantly battling your flesh. Have you shut down your heart because you're afraid of your flesh? Have you shut off desire because you believe that your heart can't be trusted? Have you never really connected spirit to spirit with God and learned how to discern the difference between your heart and your flesh? Do you want to learn how to deeply connect with God's Spirit in you and live fully alive, heart-centered, fueled by passion in your unique purpose and calling, powered by the Spirit in a life of true joy, ease, and fulfillment? Well, I'd love to teach you how and walk it out with you. I'd even learn how to teach you how to be God-powered in your business and in your giftings and in your purpose, because you were made for so much more in the life that God created you for beyond your wildest dreams. So if that's you and you're ready to learn a new way of living and leading, then click that button below. I've created a special program that teaches you how to get that breakthrough, the freedom that you want, the ease that you want, the joy that you long for. It's all waiting. Click that button below and let's talk. And let's step into that God-powered life, wilder than your wildest dreams.